Shalom, and welcome to Christians with Torah, the Beit Tehillah Community Podcast. We believe the Torah is relevant for our lives today, God's teachings and instructions. You may very well be part of the first generation to be born again, filled with the Holy Spirit, and have the Torah, a Christian with Torah. Join us as we honor the living God through the study of His Word, topical conversations, and interviews with special guests. Please welcome our hosts, Pastor Nick Plummer and Ryan Cabrera.
Shalom, everybody, and welcome to Christians with Torah, the Beit Tehillah Community Podcast. I'm here in Studio B, but today, sitting in Pastor Nick, I have a very special guest today, the man, the myth, the legend, Avi Lipkin.
Great to be here.
It is good to be here, I tell you. You know, we get special opportunities when we get you in. I don't know if I ever told you this, but when we first started coming to Beit Tehillah, my wife and I, we had been before that watching, prophecy in the news back then with J.R. Church and Gary Stearman and, Derek Gilbert and Tom Horn and all these guys. And that was kind of what canceling the cable and then watching those things as our entertainment, so to speak, is how we ended up in the Hebrew roots movement to begin with. But we were sitting here in the congregation for a service one day, and they said, Avi Lipkin will be here. And my wife had met you at a prophecy conference, I think in Orlando at one time.
Probably the Brubaker conference.
Probably.
God's news behind the news.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think it was. I was watching the kids at home, and her and her mom went. And so when we found out you were going to be here, we're like, wait, these people know Avi Lipkin? It gave Beit Tehillah a lot of credibility when we first started coming here, knowing that, they knew you. And they're like, oh, yeah, we've known Avi for 20 years or something. I was like, wow.
We were in jail together with him.
That's too funny. So anyways, I want to learn a little bit more about Avi Lipkin, the man, and I think that's what we'll do today. Last time you were here, we talked about the dangers of Islam or I should say radical Islam and the ideologies that are working their way into the West and all that stuff. So I've also had your son Aaron on. What an awesome man he is, and we really appreciate him, and he does our tours. And I don't know if anybody's familiar, but whenever Beit Tehillah takes a trip to Israel for a tour, we use Lipkin Tours, which is Avi's son's company, tour group, and they do a fantastic job. But tell us about you. So I know you grew up, you said it was in Argentina?
No.
Okay, well then tell us where it begins.
Very often as a young boy or young man, I used to complain because I felt that I was so mixed up from so many different backgrounds that I didn't really know who I was.
Sure.
And as I grew older and older, I saw things were more and more complex than I could have ever imagined. And like many Jewish people in America, my grandparents were from Russia, Poland. And they left Russia, Poland, but they didn't go straight to America. They went to Argentina.
Ah, okay.
Because at that time, it was easier to go to Argentina than to go to the United States.
Sure.
And when my parents got married and grew up, they were Spanish-speaking Argentinian Jews. And they moved to New York, and I was born a few months later. So I'm American-born, but I spoke Spanish first in my home.
So you're a Spanish-speaking New York Jew.
I'm a Hispanic, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And
I didn't see that coming.
Wait a second. So then my parents, because they grew up very poor in Argentina, there was no synagogue, there was no Hebrew education. When they came to New York, they said, we have to give our kids a Hebrew education, Jewish education. So I went to synagogue, and then I started learning Hebrew. And then, so I learned Hebrew, and I had a teacher from Israel who helped me actually to write to David Ben-Gurion in Hebrew.
Oh, okay.
And he was the first prime minister of Israel, and he answered me. I got 2 letters from Ben-Gurion. And the letters convinced me, when I was 15, that I needed to move to Israel, which I did when I was 19. Then I met my wife, and my wife's from Egypt, so she spoke Arabic. So I had to learn Arabic also.
Yeah.
So it's English, Spanish, Hebrew, Arabic. Yeah. And at the university, I studied Russian and Greek.
Okay, yeah.
Which is very good if you're a Bible scholar. Also.
Sure.
And all of these things aimed me towards a very, very cosmopolitan way of living and thinking. I'm radiated by the cultures of so many different, not countries only, but areas.
Got it. Okay, I see what you mean.
So but what I wanted to share really was my parents, because they grew up poor in Argentina, and they were the only Jews in their neighborhoods where they lived in Buenos Aires and other parts of Argentina. They grew up with Catholic school children, their age. My mom actually went to a convent because my grandfather was a traveling salesman based in the interior of the country. And the only school was a Catholic convent. And they knew my mom was Jewish, so they didn't teach her catechisms or any of that stuff,
Yeah.
But they treated my mom so well. And my mom really loved the nuns very much. And so the funny thing, the part of the story is when my parents moved to New York, we lived for a number of years in Flushing, New York. And that is a solidly Irish Catholic neighborhood. And so the nuns, would come knocking on our door, on all the doors, to raise money for the church.
Yeah.
And my mom would give them the money and say, I'm not Catholic, I'm Jewish. But
it's too funny.
I loved the nuns so much when I was a young girl in Argentina. They were so kind to me. And my mom used to sit at their feet listening to Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, who they were playing on the organ in the convent. And I think I grew up loving Bach in utero. I got it from my mom.
Yeah.
Love for classical music. Again, all these different cultures in our house.
Sure.
Spanish and classical. And anyway, and my father was very funny. He would go out into the street at age 5 to play soccer with his Argentine school buddies. We're all Catholic. And there really wasn't so much, food in the house. So the Catholic priest would come from the church, gather up all the children, and take them to the church, probably to have breakfast because there was no food in the home. So
Sure.
These are all poor kids, And my father, who, rest in peace, he lived till 99, he recited the Lord's Prayer in Spanish. Never forgot it. He must have learned a whole lot of things in that Catholic
I bet
church,
he did.
let me tell you. So anyway, so I was taught, it wasn't that I was taught later, in retrospect, to love the Christians, because when I went to Hebrew school, I was taught to hate the Christians.
Interesting.
That the Christians are the bad guys. Muslims are the good guys, Christians are the bad guys, because of Spain in 1492.
Sure.
And it wasn't until I moved to Israel when I met my wife. And my wife said to me, are you crazy? I said, why am I crazy? This is our first meeting on a cup of coffee.
Sure.
She said to me, why did you leave America? Only crazy people leave America.
Yeah.
I said to her, well, the Gentiles hate us, the Goyim, the Gentiles, they hate us. And because in America, you were a Jew or you were a Gentile. That's how I grew up.
Sure.
And my wife said to me, and who are the Gentiles? I said, the Christians. Either you're a Jew or you're a Christian. Either a Jew or a Gentile. And she said to me, not only are you crazy, you also don't know anything. And she said to me, Christians cannot be Gentiles. Because Christians have the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It says 7 times in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Sure.
They have the same Torah as the Jews. And the Messiah is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. So for Christians, it's Jesus Christ. Terrific. But they're not Gentiles. Gentiles means pagans. And when I go to churches and the pastor says, we welcome our Jewish brother Avi, and we Gentiles, and I stop him.
Yeah.
I say, you're not Gentiles. Gentiles are pagans.
Interesting.
So my wife said to me, the Muslims, they're good people because they're people in the image of God. But they're the pagans. They're the Gentiles.
Interesting.
So I hope the first thing, and the only thing people get from this broadcast is that Christians aren't Gentiles because they're not pagans.
Yeah. And in Ephesians it says that he's speaking to, I think it's like verse 10 or 11, he says, to you who are in times past Gentiles, who used to be a Gentile.
Right.
But now, because you believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are no longer.
And to make it a little deeper, the word Gentiles means the nations.
Sure. Goy. Yeah, Goy. It's just a nation.
The nations that were not at Mount Sinai when Moses and all these 2 million people who left Egypt, a lot of other slaves fled with the Israelites.
Sure.
There were people who suffered from leprosy. They had leper colonies, and they all fled. That's why you have so many chapters in the Bible about leprosy.
Interesting.
Because a lot of the people who accompanied the Israelites were lepers. And anyone who was at Mount Sinai is part of that covenant.
Yeah.
And for people who became Christians, believe in Jesus Christ. So they are now grafted in to the legacy of Mount Sinai.
Right.
So, for example, I'll tell you, I love the Chinese, I love the Hindus, but they are not part of the covenant because they don't know the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Right.
And the Muslims also don't. The Muslims have another God, Allah, the moon god, the war god, and the sword god.
Mm-hmm.
And their God is greater, they say,
Sure.
than the God of the Jews and the Christians. And if you're a Christian, you know that it was Satan who said he was greater than God before his fall from heaven.
Yep.
And also one of the names of Allah is Al-Makr, which means the greatest of all the liars and deceivers. So in Islam, it's a virtue to lie,
Yeah.
which is the opposite of what we Jews and Christians share.
Interesting. So, that's incredible. I'll tell you, most of the time when I've encountered other, especially Orthodox Jews, they look at the Muslims as if they believe in the same God.
Correct.
And they look at the Christians as if we're pagan.
Right.
And so it's obviously comforting to hear that there are folks out there within the Jewish community that think the opposite, you know?
Well, you know what? When you go to seminary 3 years, I mean, it's true. I went to this heretical, conservative Judaism seminary in Jerusalem. You learn things, and you learn the history. And the history is that the church, okay, when was the Talmud written? Talmud was written in the year 500 AD. At that time...
In 500 AD?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Mishnah, which predates the Talmud, is 200 AD.
Okay.
But in the Talmud, it says...
But that is, my understanding was the Babylonian Talmud was written in Babylon, no?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Don't forget, during the Roman persecutions, the Jewish community in Babylonia was thriving.
Okay, good to know. I didn't know
So
that.
this went, you stick with me. Anyway, so what happened was the early churches, until the Protestant Reformation,
Oh, wow. So 1500s, right?
had statues.
Oh, yeah.
Protestants took out the statues.
That's right.
But it says in the Talmud, Jews are not allowed to go to houses of pagan worship.
Correct. Which the whole pantheon of saints is just a holdover from pagan idolatry.
So, by the way, I would go to a Catholic church also if I were invited.
Sure.
And I actually spoke in front of the main assembly hall in the Catholic church in Brownsville in Spanish. It was very well received. Then after I left the church, that the priest there was banned. He was sent off.
Go figure.
He was punished for having me. But I love Catholics. I love Protestants. Because I'm a Jew, I love everybody. I love Southern Baptists. I also love Northern Baptists.
Yeah.
And you know the difference between them.
No.
Northern Baptists go to hell.
I heard this.
Yeah,
This is like the old guys falls off a cliff and he's hanging by the edge. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And the guy runs up to the side and he says, "Hey, are you Baptist?" And the guy says, "Yes, I'm Baptist." He says, "Oh, awesome." He says, "Are you Reformed Baptist or Unreformed Baptist or Primitive?"
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, I'm Reformed Baptist." Okay, 1783 or 1852 or whatever, you know, the years. And he's like 1753. He just stomps on his hand and kicks him off. Says, "Heretic." Sorry, good Baptist jokes.
Yes. So anyway, the our famous philosopher Maimonides, who lived, I think it was 11 something to 12 something. I don't keep forgetting the years. He would say that on the one hand, he would say that Jews should not go into a church because it is a house of pagan worship because of the idols.
Right.
He said it was permissible, and this is what the rabbis say. It is permissible for a Jew to go into a mosque because there are no idols. There's nothing or pictures or icons. But on the other hand, Maimonides did also say that it is permissible to teach Torah to a Christian because Christians revere the Torah just like the Jews do. It is forbidden to teach a Muslim the Torah because he will use that information to destroy the Torah.
Yeah.
Because the Quran replaces the Judeo-Christian Bible.
Right. Well, and it says that it's corrupted, right? Which was
It's corrupted by rabbis and priests.
But the Quran doesn't say that, correct? It's only the sheikhs and the imams that say that. But
Yeah.
the Quran says that upholds the validity of the Torah, right?
Right. And who? Well, yes and no. Who wrote the Quran? A rabbi and a priest.
So tell me about that.
The rabbi was Ovadia ben Shalom. That's his name in Hebrew.
Okay.
And in Arabic, his name was Abdullah ibn Salam. It's the same name, but in Arabic.
Sure.
And the priest was Sergius Bukhara. And you have to remember that you have New Testament and you have Old Testament and you have Talmud. in the Quran because it was written by a rabbi and a priest.
Sure.
And they promised these two men of God, the Christian and the Jew, freedom. But then when they completed the work, they were stoned to death.
Go figure, right?
Because lying is a virtue in Islam.
Yeah.
So this is a sad aspect of history. One of my sadnesses is that Jews and Christians do not read the Quran. And in order to read the Quran, you really need to study the Talmud first and the New Testament first, because then you see the fingerprint in the Quran of the rabbi and the priest.
Got it.
That I just mentioned. And this is all in my book, Islam Prophesied in Genesis, my book number 5.
Okay.
And my website is biblicalalliance.com, and
Okay.
people can order it from biblicalalliance.com.
Right. And yeah, you've written,
7
books. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And they're all color coded, which is kind of cool. I started to
Yeah.
notice that because you'll say, like, my yellow book, right,
Yeah.
which is the Return to Mecca, or
Right.
my black book, which is the,
Islam Prophesied in
Prophesied
Genesis.
Yeah. And then there's the red book, right? And then
The red book is about terrorism,
Yeah.
right? Or the right color for it.
No doubt. So, well, I don't want to totally change topics, but did you encounter Islam before you ended up in Israel, or were you more dealing with Christians and Jews growing up all through high school? Because you went to high school here in the States, right?
Right.
And that was what, New York?
Yes, in New York. And the answer to that is neither.
Okay.
Because when I lived in New York until age 19, I had zero contact with Christians other than the lies that I was taught in Hebrew school, that all Christians are bad and they all hate us.
Interesting.
So I just preferred to move to Israel and get away from America.
Sure.
I don't really think I ever really hated the Christians. I just felt, well, if they hate me, then what am I doing in America?
Right.
As far as the Muslims, what I had was a romanticized view of 1492, in which the Muslims and the Jews had been allies in Spain for 760 years. And when the Catholics won in 1492, they expelled the Muslims and the Jews together. And actually, my wife is from a Spanish family that fled to Morocco and Turkey because the Turkish Empire took in the Jews who fled from the Catholic persecution.
Interesting. And then somehow ended up in Egypt at some point.
They came to Egypt 3 generations ago. And so, of course, my wife speaks Egyptian Arabic. She grew up in a Muslim ambience. You know, it's funny, we're both Jewish. So my wife and I are permitted to each other by religion. But I'm a Jew who thinks like a Christian, and she's a Jew who thinks like a Muslim. And so she has been my teacher for the last 54 years.
Yeah.
And I would never have written the 7 books that I wrote without the inspiration and guidance of my wife. And I would not be speaking in 1,000 churches like I have over the last 33 years. My wife is the one who really gave me a preparation that I would never have if I had married, say, a girl from Argentina or a girl from the U.S. or Russia.
Yeah.
You know, I had to marry that specific woman, and God had me meet her. It was like lightning out of a clear blue sky.
So how did you meet your wife? Obviously, you guys both met in Israel, right?
We met on a bus, and it was hate at first sight. And what happened was I was wearing my youth movement uniform, and you have to understand, in Israel we have like 1 million political parties. I'm exaggerating a little bit. We have 40 political parties. By the way, my Bible Block party is one of the parties.
Yes, we're going to get to that for sure.
Yeah. But when I met her in 1970, there were maybe about 15, 20 parties, say it's 40 parties. And I was wearing the uniform of my youth movement, which was kind of like a Boy Scout uniform. It was actually a dark blue New York police shirt with a light blue tie and like a cap, Air Force type cap from those days.
Okay.
And epaulets and braids and buttons and decorations. I was very, very active in the Beitar youth movement. And I get on this bus in Jerusalem after one of our activities, and there were a few students from Argentina, Uruguay on the bus, communists. And what had happened was their parents got them on a plane to Israel, got them out of Argentina, because communists and socialists were being picked up by the police and the military, and then tortured and then thrown out of aircraft over the Atlantic, of course without a parachute. Not that a parachute would have helped them in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah, wow.
30,000 desaparecidos, 30,000 people disappeared. So the kids on that bus were actually survivors that the parents sent to Israel.
Wow.
And
I didn't know. There's so much history out there that we don't even know about.
well, it's not only knowing, it's living it.
Yeah.
Because, as I said before, my background, I'm being radiated all the time by all this different. Later, it was
Cultures,
the Christian culture that irradiated me. But when I met my wife, she was with this group of Argentine communists.
God.
And they were all holding shopping bags. They'd come out of the supermarket. It was just before Sabbath. And I get on the bus, and all of a sudden I hear them cursing me and my mother. Because in Spanish, they like to curse the mother.
Yeah. Y tu mamá también.
I turned around and my eyes fell on that poor lady who became my wife.
Yeah.
And I started yelling at her in Argentine Spanish. And she went like this. She says, no. I know something's going on here. I'm not part of it. I said, where are you from? From Egypt. I said, idiota. Idiot, you're yelling at the wrong person.
Yeah.
And I apologized and forgot about the Argentines. By the way, later, these Argentine communists became my best friends.
How funny.
We would pick on each other. We'd have a great time.
Yeah.
But I said to my wife, I'm the editor of the English language newspaper at Hebrew University. Can I interview you? She said, sure. So, I ended up carrying her shopping bags to her dorm room, and we got married.
Huh?
And I said to her, can you make me a cup of coffee? So in about 5 minutes, there was all this food on the table. I didn't know where all this food came from.
Oh, yeah.
I said, that's the one.
She won you. Yeah.
That was the one.
It.
The way to a man's heart is through the stomach.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And so she prepares me the coffee. I take out my pouch. And that's when she said to me, before you ask me anything, I want to ask you, are you crazy? Why did you leave America? You don't know anything. Christians are not pagans. They're not Gentiles. And 54 years I'm with my wife. Every discussion starts out, are you crazy? You don't know anything.
Yeah. Wow.
But
at least she's consistent.
But she didn't kill me. She keeps me on a tight rein.
I bet she does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now you've been married for 54 years.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you stay married for 54 years? That's incredible.
Well, there's something called fear of the Lord and something called fear of the woman.
Oh, roger that.
And I love her. She is the love of my life. She is the mother of my children, my two best sons. Aaron is one of them, and my 9 grandkids. And she's mother hen. She henpecks everybody.
Yeah.
Drives everyone crazy. You know what? I would not be alive today without my wife henpecking me, taking care of my health. Yeah.
Amen.
God gave her to me.
Amen. That's good. All right, so you were already part of a youth movement. You called it what? The Beitar?
Beitar. And it used to
What
be...
is Beitar? House of what?
No, it was Brit Yosef Trumpeldor Riga.
Okay, so it's an acronym.
Trumpeldor, Joseph Trumpeldor was a great Russian war hero who lost his arm fighting the Japanese in 1905. When he moved to Israel, he was a pioneer.
Okay. And
he died in one of the settlements, Tel Hai, in the north of Israel. And he was fighting with one arm. He had a pistol in one hand, and he was shooting these terrorists, but they killed him. And so it's called the Covenant of Yosef Trumpeldor Riga. Riga is the capital of Latvia. And that's where the youth movement started in 1923.
So was it a political movement? I mean,
political, absolutely political.
And what was it? It doesn't sound communist, but
comes
from Latvia. So
it was right wing anti-communist.
Right wing anti-communist.
And in fact, if you're following the news today in Israel, there's a problem with what they call the judicial reforms.
Right.
And in one sentence, what it is basically is that the socialists and communists have been controlling all spheres of Israeli public life for the last 100 years.
Right.
And the courts are also in the hands of judges who are socialists and communists.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of Christians understand the communist influence over Israel.
Right.
Like the whole idea of a kibbutz.
It's a kolkhoz in Russia.
Right. So it's a commune,
yeah.
Right? And these people put everything in together, and everybody owns everything together.
Right.
And I know that over time, capitalism has slowly but surely taken over as an economic system over
Correct.
there. But I think there's still some holdovers within the law. Like who was I talking to? We were at a farm in Itamar, and the guy was trying to get chickens to start raising chickens. And here in the U.S., if you want to start raising chickens, you just start raising chickens. If you want to sell eggs, you got to get your permit, and you got to keep your cleanliness standards or whatever. But there's no limit to the number of permits.
Right.
This guy was having to enter into a lottery to be able to raise chickens.
Right.
And he wanted, he had already set up all the infrastructure, was getting ready to, try to get 2,500 chickens. But like I said, it's still that communist holdover where they're allowing certain people to do certain things and other people not to.
It's not who you are or what you know.
Yeah.
It's who you know.
Oh, yeah. And that's the odd part about communism. You would think it wouldn't be that way. Because everybody romanticizes this concept of everyone, what is it? Everybody according to their need, or everybody according to their ability, or whatever the.
I'll never forget in my first visit to Israel in 1966, I was told by my host that it takes 6 months from the moment you order a telephone to get a telephone line to your house. 6 months.
Yeah.
Socialism.
Yeah, that's socialism.
And now you want a phone, everyone is running after you to give you a phone.
Right.
But that's capitalism.
It is.
Israel has become a capitalist powerhouse.
For sure.
But the people who control that are socialists.
Well, and that's the odd part. I think that the holdovers are, like you mentioned, in the judicial system. So my understanding is that the way the judicial system works currently, or at least the Supreme Court in Israel, what we would consider the Supreme Court in Israel, it's a good old boy network where they appoint themselves over and over, right? So
and they bring in family members and friends, people who are close to them.
And so there's no democratic or republic system where they're electing these people.
Correct.
or elected body is then appointing those people like we do in the States.
Correct.
So then now what's happening is the Knesset is trying to change that so that the Knesset will appoint them, and then some other group or the prime minister or president will appoint them.
There will be actually a committee.
Right.
And the committee will comprise judges, politicians,
elected officials.
And people also who are not exactly with this group or that group.
Sure.
In order to have a broader approach to how we should appoint our judges.
Right, because right now you have a left-wing court, and then they continue to appoint people like them.
Right. Another thing also, they are very racist.
Ooh.
In other words, my wife, Rachel, is from the Jews of Egypt. The Sephardic Jews, the Jews who emanated from Spain.
Sure.
There's only one judge out of dozens who comes from the Middle Eastern Jewry. Also, Arab judges is only one.
Interesting.
And if you're going by proportional, there should be Arab judges. There should be more Sephardic judges.
Yeah.
But these are white European Ashkenazi Jews who. I don't want to say they don't believe in God, but they are socialists.
Who would vote Democrat if they were here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's why Biden supports them.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, and this was the odd part to me because I saw that, I guess there's a part of me that's a little naive. And I like to think that the United Nations or these other international bodies, that there's some good there and that it's not all a sham, that there really isn't this global conspiracy to just basically knock down all good, virtuous, righteous things.
Right.
That's in my mind.
Right.
But then things like the Israeli Supreme Court issue comes up, and we see that they're the only nation, and there's the 20 top nations in the UN, the United States, the United Kingdom. You go down the list. All of them appoint their judges from, or at least confirm them from an elected body, so that the people who are confirming them are elected officials by the people, right? There's this democratic system.
Right.
And so Israel's the only one in that category of quote-unquote democratic nations that does it that way.
Right.
So then why are all these countries up in arms, supposedly, about Israel's judicial reforms? I mean, I don't even understand if Israel's coming closer to being like these nations and taking a step forward, supposedly, in the direction that they're already in, why are they opposing it?
One of the things that these one world order countries or leaderships are saying, for example, who agrees with what Israel is doing regarding the Supreme Court? Hungary, which is Catholic and very conservative. Poland, which is Catholic, very conservative. There's certain Italy, Prime Minister Netanyahu just went to Italy, met with Prime Minister Meloni, who's Christian conservative.
Okay.
And see, the one world government doesn't like them either.
Yeah, sure.
And there is a battle for the soul of European countries. I personally think, as time goes by, and as the Islamic threat grows with their population numbers in Europe, that more and more European countries will turn towards the right wing and religious.
It seems that way,
Yeah.
Yeah, as the darkness encroaches, people are attracted to the light.
Yeah.
Versus the gray.
They want to save their country.
Shadowy areas. Well, it's not until it hits them in the face and they start to get some reality, right? Splash in the face. Because when you're left with affluence, right, there's dangers to too much affluence, right?
Yes, and one of the reasons that the Muslims were brought in as immigrants into Europe was because the white Christian Europeans had decided it was nice to have one child per family, and then in the end they had a labor shortage, and they had to bring in the Muslims and also black people from Africa to come and work.
Yeah, they needed a labor class.
Yeah,
because they just didn't even have the people to do it.
Correct.
That's unfortunate, and it's true in Western economies in general. People are so self-centered; they're not family-centered.
Right.
And so everything's all about the individual, and because of that, now we have 1.3 children per family.
Right.
I personally have 4 kids. I feel like I'm doing
Praise
my
God.
part. I go to a congregation where there's, our pastor has 8 children. Our other pastor has 6 children. There's plenty of families around here with
That's
lots of
because
kids.
they're secretly Catholic.
Exactly.
My 2 boys have 4 kids and 5 kids each. So I said, they're Jews, but they're secretly Catholic because they have a lot of kids.
Yeah, I don't know, man. The settler group that I meet over there, the groups that are pioneers in the Judea and Samaria, boy, they're having a lot of kids over there.
Praise God.
They are, man. And I'll tell you what, if they don't expand their number, it takes longer to do it by having kids, right? Because you got to wait for them to grow up.
Right.
But I mean, the next generation and the generation after that, boy, you've got a lot of people that are.
Listen, we have surpassed 500,000 Jewish settlers in Judea and Samaria.
Wow,
that's a lot.
It is a lot. And then, oddly enough, I drive through Judea and Samaria, and you go through these Arab towns, and they're all like vacant. I mean, these houses have 3-4 stories to them, but you can look through and see that only the bottom story is occupied, if it is at all, and then the other 3 stories aren't even built out. It's
also there are a lot of these Arab, Palestinians in quotes. They go abroad to make their money, and then they send the money home to build a house. So they're not really living there.
Right.
Or they come for a few months out of the year.
Right.
I mean, I shouldn't criticize them because I also come to the States for 3-4 months of the year to work.
Sure.
And the rest of the time I'm in Israel on my computer writing books and meeting people and stuff. But I'm Judeo-Christian Bible Block Party.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's get into that. The Bible Block Party. You mentioned that you've been working on this for a long time.
Yes, from 1998.
Wow.
So that's 25 years.
And so what's the premise? Obviously, Israeli politics can be confusing, I think, to most people, but the basis of it is a parliamentary government. There's multiple parties. People don't vote for people into the legislature, right, which they call the Knesset.
Right.
They vote for parties.
You vote for lists.
Right.
Each party has a list of candidates.
Okay.
And you have to have at least 140,000 votes for the first 4 members of Knesset. It's about 35,000 votes per member of Knesset, but it's not enough that you get 35,000 votes. You have to get 4 times that amount, 140,000, to get the first 4 in. They don't want little parties. They want parties of at least...
Interesting. I didn't know that. So that's a barrier to entry.
It's a barrier to entry, and let me tell you, it's hard for us. One of the reasons that, we have 10,000 Messianics in Israel, maybe 15,000, nobody really knows. And we only get 400 votes in each election. And I talk to these Messianic people. They love me. They love the party. But they say, if we don't have 140,000 votes, it's like we throw the votes in the garbage.
Sure.
So we vote for Netanyahu.
Yeah.
It's the next best thing. And it'll be very hard for me ever to reach 140,000 unless God intervenes.
Sure.
And opens up some new doors. And we'll see. And we've been in 5 elections already.
So, and that's hard to build a party when you're constantly campaigning, right? Because then all your dollars go to that instead of actually building up, a base of people that understand.
Right.
So then help us understand obviously only Israeli citizens can vote.
Correct.
And so then for you, telling all of us about the party doesn't necessarily grow the party, except it may be some way of a fundraising. I don't know if that's legal.
Fundraising in a moderate way.
Sure.
Because you have to remember that foreigners are not allowed to pay into the Israeli political system.
Sure. So then we just buy books, and then you do what you need to do.
I declare
Yeah.
every penny I get.
Yeah.
And, it says in the New Testament, give unto the Lord that which is the Lord's, and give unto Caesar that which is
Sure.
Caesar's. In my case, it's give unto the Lord that which is the Lord's, and give unto the two Caesars that which the two Caesars are stealing from you, because I pay taxes to Uncle Sam and I pay taxes in Israel.
Oh, wow.
But the money has to go through me, and then I'm not allowed to give so much money. I'm only allowed to give like 3,000 shekels a year.
Oh, wow.
Which is like $500, $600. And it's very hard to get new people to join the party because I'm all the time in the States raising money for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then, for example, next week, I have to pay my lawyer, my debt to the lawyer. And the lawyer has been doing a very good job.
Yeah.
I have my secretary, my office, everything. I owe $45,000.
Wow, yeah.
And they sent me a letter. I'll show you on my telephone if you want. We are ready to forego half if you pay half. So this coming week, I'm going to have to take a loan to pay it.
Yeah.
Only God knows how I'll return it. I'm confident I'll return, but this week I'm sending $22,000 to my lawyers, and then we are debt free.
Wow. Okay, cool.
But the money has to be a loan. Mm-hmm. I have to give it as a loan. And then one day when the party has hundreds of thousands of members, one day the party will decide to return.
So you could be giving the party a loan?
Yes.
So people could give you money to help loan.
After I pay the taxes, then I can give a loan to the party. After I give a loan to the party. When the party is rich, then we get funding from the government, then we get the money back.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
It's a little complicated, and
so,
you have to be committed to the long term.
So I'm a dreamer.
Yeah.
Okay. So
join the crowd.
I know you are too.
Yeah.
And I know that people like the story. Help me understand what is. There's a 40 parties as you mentioned.
Right.
And there's no party in Israel that fits what you describe as.
Right. There are
as
no
the
Christian candidates. No Christian or Messianic candidates in any of the parties other than mine. And my purpose is to give representation to Christians and Messianics in the land of Israel.
Got it. And so right now...
Also, Jews who may be Reformed, Conservative, or Orthodox who don't fit the mold of the other parties.
Got it. Because there's, like recently the religious Zionist group, right? So it was Smotrich and Ben Gvir.
Yeah.
These guys have obviously... there's a large coalition of those guys. This is going to be the ones that are in Judea and Samaria that are pioneers, that are... Israeli nationalistic, group. Also, I would say some of them anti-Christian, but a lot of them not, because I think Judea and Samaria gets a lot of support from the Christians.
Right.
So you can't be anti-Christian and also desire the support of the Christians, right? I suppose. But then you have the super ultra-Orthodox groups, which is what the Shas party.
Shas and also Degel Torah, which is a European Jewish ultra-Orthodox.
And so you have this group, and then you have like what would be the normal, call it Republican right-wing establishment party, which is the Likud.
Correct.
And this is the largest party in the Knesset. And then there's an Arab list, right? A group that's against everybody pretty much, because his hand will be against every man and every man's hand against him. So this is the Islamic group, and then you have like some leftist groups.
Yes, they're about 15-20%.
So then you have a Labor Party, which they call what?
Well, it's called Labor Party.
Okay, and then there's a Blue and White Party,
which is kind of middle of the road. Yeah.
Okay, is it really middle of the road?
I would say slightly. I wouldn't say leftist. I would say liberal tendencies.
Okay, liberal tendencies,
which takes them towards the left, actually.
Sure, and puts them in the coalition with that side, and the group that's Smotrich and Shas probably won't deal with those guys.
Well, they will deal, but the problem is that the Blue and White are so critical and so harsh against Likud and right-wing religious that they're not looking to be friends. They're looking to replace the Likud and the nationalists.
So are they anti-religious nationalist, or
I think it's more they are against those specific personalities, Ben Gvir and Smotrich.
Yeah.
I will say one thing though. I don't have anything personal against Smotrich, but he wants to change the law of return. The law of return used to be if Hitler could kill anyone who had 1/4 Jewish blood, one grandparent, then that person should be allowed to move to Israel.
Sure.
As part of this law, which has been in effect until now, we have tens of thousands every year of immigrants coming to Israel. They're not Jewish. They're 3/4 Christian.
Gotcha.
They're Christian believers, you know.
Sure.
So he wants to change that. He wants to change the law to one parent. That would
so then 50% instead of 25, so to speak.
Right, and that would cut out a tremendous potential reservoir of immigration to Israel.
Right.
And one of the things that I shared last night here in Beit Tehillah is that there's going to be, I believe, a major war with ISIS. ISIS, I believe, is going to overturn Saudi Arabia with all its oil, overturn Jordan, overturn Syria, overturn Lebanon, and then they're going to turn their guns towards Israel. And Israel will have to expand in order to defend itself. You cannot stay in such a small country when they're shooting at you. Israel's borders, I predict, will grow from the Nile to the Euphrates. We are going to need massive immigration of Jews and Christians to the land of Israel. At this stage, Christians are not allowed at all, except for those married to Jews. I predict in the future, I think I'm the only one in Israel and the only one in the world who's saying this, I want to create a United States of Israel. In other words, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Saudi will now become Christian countries under the aegis of Israel, under the flag of Israel. They will be federal autonomous republics as part of the state of Israel. And the Jews will maintain the majority in what is today Israel.
Got it.
But it'll be a fellowship party, a fellowship nation. And Jews and Christians together, which is what I said at the very beginning. We are one people. We're the people of the Bible, people of the book. And so I'm very excited that we're living in such a time as this, and that we are witnesses to the miracles that God has been performing and has yet to perform.
No, I'm astounded at the recent news of Saudi Arabia and Iran reestablishing or normalizing relations again. Because obviously the Shiites and the Sunnis hate each other.
Exactly.
As you've mentioned in the past. But also the fact that the Abraham Accords with these Gulf states that have been, stepping up and normalizing relations with Israel makes you kind of think like we thought Saudi was next in the Abraham Accords, but then this has obviously put a major wrench in the spokes to progress in that direction. And it's almost an overt sign that they're not going to be normalizing relations with Israel.
By the way, let me tell you something that was in the news this morning. The Saudis are attaching conditions to the agreement with Iran. The Saudis are testing Iran before they set up embassies.
So what's the conditions?
We don't know yet. But
hopefully it's a nuclear deproliferation.
I don't know what the conditions are, but I will say that if you remember ISIS in Iraq and Syria, ISIS was beheading Shiites more than it was beheading the heads of Christians. They beheaded everybody. But the ISIS people who are Sunnis would say, we hate Shiites more than we hate the Jews.
It's interesting. Sectarian stuff,
It's stuff that goes back 1,400 years. And there's no solution to that hatred other than them abandoning that religion.
How it's odd, right? Because obviously, Protestants and Catholics.
But they got over it.
Right, we don't get along, but, or we don't see eye to eye, so to speak. But, it's the ideology of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Until we both defeat the enemy, and then we're back to being enemies of each other.
Right.
It's odd how that goes. So obviously, Christians and Jews have a common enemy out there in the world. Common enemies.
Two common enemies.
Okay, what are they?
One is Islam.
Yep.
And the other is the secular atheist one world government.
I'm about to say, we're with it. I'd say globalist and the radical Islamists.
Right.
So we have common enemies. How do you see, obviously the Bible Block Party is a big piece of your work, but for us out here in the Goyim, in the nations,
Remember, you're too young. There used to be an LP record about the first family, and so Chiang Kai-shek, was at this luncheon at JFK's White House, and he said, "I want a ham sandwich with white lettuce, with lettuce and tomato." And so JFK said, "Would you like some mayo?" Like Mao Zedong, mayo. He says, "Please, not to mention that name." So, so what do you say here in the Goyim, in the Gentiles? Please, not to mention that name.
So how do you see, folks out here, Christians that are in the nations? What do you foresee that we can do to support Israel, support the Jewish people, and further our common causes?
Okay. Firstly, without being too nepotistic,
sure.
My son Aaron has made 4 DVDs. I think he's working on new ones now. But he proves the veracity of the Bible. He proves that Shiloh really existed.
Yeah.
I mean, Shiloh was unknown until 1967. The altar of Joshua has been found.
Yeah, yeah.
And they found the lead tablet with
right.
the oldest Hebrew letters from 1200 BC. Bethel, the giant footprints. There are archaeological discoveries which all prove the veracity of the Bible. Now, why are atheists, Jew or Christian atheists, why are they atheists? And that's because they say, well, all these things in the Bible are fables.
Right.
They're fairy tales.
Fairy tales.
And so the job of the Jews and the Christians who really believe in God is to go out and to convert these atheists back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and say, hey, listen, the Bible is true. Once you can convince the world that the Bible really is true and it's not fables, I think we're going to have the victory over the atheists and the one world government.
Mm. Okay, I like that. And he has, those are awesome DVDs. I've seen them. The one of the cool things is I believe Beit Tehillah congregation is in the credits there for supporting
absolutely
by the drones.
Right.
Because and I guess again, me being naive, I would think that there are people out there with drones that are doing the work already that Aaron's doing. Aaron's private citizen out there doing the work.
He's the first.
And so just flying drones over these areas that are not really inhabited currently in Judea and Samaria, which the world would call the West Bank, the biblical heartland would be a better description of it. But it's really where all the Bible stories that we read, these accounts that we read in the Bible, this is where they happened.
Right.
And then how do we prove that? Well, the basic first step is flying a drone, which is what Aaron does, over these areas and seeing, this looks like there's a structure there. Hey, this looks like there's something there.
And then the archaeologists come in.
Exactly right. And then pointing it to the academic groups that can come in there and actually do the work of excavating and figuring out, oh, look, we found a lead tablet, right? That when we scan it, we found the verifiably oldest Hebrew inscription we've ever found in history. I mean, hello.
There's another thing. Shiloh was discovered how the settlers came to this Arab Christian town called the ruins of Shiloh.
Huh.
And
so how did they know it was Shiloh?
So they asked the people, how do you know where Shiloh is? So it's right here in the valley.
Yeah.
They went down, they found all these pieces of broken pottery.
Yeah.
Because, after the sacrifices,
they break.
Smash
and let me tell you, there's a ton of pottery there. I mean, you just walk around and just look a handle.
Take as much as you want. Yeah. So anyway, when they brought in the archaeologists, they found 4 Greek churches, and they started digging. And 2 yards down, 6 feet down, they found in front of a church a Greek mosaic saying, "May the Lord Jesus Christ have mercy on the people of Shiloh."
Huh? Yeah, exactly.
This is from the 7th century AD.
I've seen that, actually.
Yeah.
I've been there.
So I'm just saying, this is a joint project of the Jews and the Christians.
Not only that, the thing that was impressive to me. I like the fact that there's things that point and say, hey, this is the actual place.
Right.
What was even cooler is that they think they've found the actual place where the tabernacle stood for 369 years.
Correct.
So this is when you read about Eli and his sons, and you read about Hannah, and you read about Samuel.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the place where all of this stuff went down, and you can be like, wait, that means the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, stood right here.
Right.
And the glory of God stood in this place, And so I remember we were pruning, being there pruning and looking up and seeing the visitor center. There's a UFO circle-looking visitor center thing
Flying
there.
saucer center.
Yeah. and looking and being like, wow. And they have flags set up where the tabernacle would have stood. And it's just like, man, I mean, that's that it's right there.
And you know what?
And it exists, like right here, like just like this table exists in front of me.
And we're the generation that is witnessing
Amen.
this. And we're part of continuing discoveries.
Amen. Cool. So if somebody wants to support your work, the Bible Block Party, what would be the best thing for them to do, and where can they go to do it?
I would say they should go to my website, which is biblicalalliance.com.
Biblicalalliance.com, spelled normal.
Right.
Okay.
And there we take donations.
Okay.
And remember, we are not 501c3.
Okay.
I'm a lecturer, I'm an author, and everything gets cleared with the tax authorities. There's no messing around with that.
Sure.
And God willing, the day will come that our party will get into the Knesset.
Okay. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you and ask you a question, could they email you? Or
Vic Mord. Vic, like victory.
Yep.
VIC. MORD, like Mordecai. 2001 at yahoo.com.
That's another thing. I don't think people realize that your book, you wrote the original books on Islam, you wrote under an alias, Victor Mordecai.
I was afraid to be killed.
For good reason.
Right.
But you've since come out of the shadow.
Well, you can't run for office under an assumed name.
Roger that. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, so Vic Mord 2001 at yahoo.com, and they can also probably contact you through the website at biblicalalliance.com,
right.
I'm sure. And then you can give there. They can buy your books there,
right,
and all that kind of stuff. And I recommend all of his books. They're fascinating. What's funny is you're the type that like you can pull on so many different threads, and we can unravel like any subject, history, all that kind of stuff. So
everything is interconnected. I connect the dots.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So awesome. Well, like I said, if you wanted to reach out to him, you can do that through the means we mentioned. You can keep the conversation going with us in the comments, or you can email me at ryan@twopraise.net. Bless you guys. Have a great week.
Shalom, y'all.